We are jumping into a series this morning that I am really excited about. It's a brand new series that we're calling Win the Day. And as we kick off this series, as we kick off this morning, I just want to start by asking you a question. And quite honestly, it's kind of a personal question. It's a little bit intimate, but I think, we're in church and we kind of just dive into the heart of things in church. So we can just kind of dive right into it. We get to kind of get to know each other really fast, if that's okay. So it's kind of a personal question, but I think you can handle it. You ready? Have you ever gotten stuck in a bathroom before? It's a rhetorical question, for the record. You don't have to admit. Now, I'll tell you, I have never personally gotten stuck in the bathroom before, but I have gotten stuck in a refrigerator before. And that was an interesting experience, okay? So in college, let's tell you real quick, when I was probably a junior in college, I've discovered in our dorm room, they had a little kitchenette thing in there, discovered in there that if I took all of the things out of the fridge, which quite honestly did not take a lot of work in college, but if I took all of the things out of the fridge, and then I took all of the shelves and drawers out of the fridge, my little self could actually fit in the fridge. And so I would wait till the time that my roommates usually get home. And I would empty everything out and put it in a cabinet. And then I would hide myself in the fridge. And I would just wait for them to come and go to get a drink out of the fridge. And then I just jump out at them. And it was awesome. Now, the thing is, fridges are like really soundproof, so you actually can't hear very well in there. So I was just as scared as they were when they opened the door, but it was still fun for me, it was still fun for me. So I did this enough times that they started getting tired of it. And so one day I was at home with a few roommates, and they pranked me. They made me think that our other roommate was coming home, like he was about to get home. They're like, hey, hurry up, get in the fridge, get in the fridge, get in the fridge. And so I run and I open the door and I rip everything out of there. We throw it in trash bags, we hide it in the closet. I jump in the fridge and close the door, and I'm waiting. Now remember, I can't hear anything in the fridge. A few minutes go by, a few more minutes go by, a few more minutes go by. I'm like, what's going on? I go to open the door. I go push on the door. I go, boop. And they had tied ropes around the fridge and just left me inside of it for the first time. And so I'm just like, I'm freaking out. I'm like shaking the fridge. Like I about tipped it over. I mean, we were this close to being on the 60 Minutes episode, it was bad. And finally they're like, okay, this dude's like gonna freak out. Like he's about to just go into a panic attack. So we're gonna let him out. And they finally let me out of the fridge. So I've never been stuck in a bathroom, but I have been stuck in a fridge before. Now, I read this story recently. It was a fascinating story. This woman a few years ago in Kansas. Interesting things always happen in Kansas, right? This woman in Kansas actually got stuck in the bathroom, but it was actually kind of on her own choice. She was at her boyfriend's house, and one day she went to the bathroom. The only problem is she didn't come out of the bathroom. It's a true story. You can look this up. She stayed in the bathroom for 2 years. And every day, her boyfriend would come to check on her. And every day, her boyfriend would bring her food. Now, 2 years later, she finally decided to get out of the bathroom. Okay. And I kid you not, that's probably too much for us in church this morning, maybe too much research, but just hang on with me. True story. She was physically stuck to the seat after 2 years. They had to surgically remove a toilet seat from her, okay? Now they asked him, hey, how did this woman stay in your bathroom for 2 years? He said, every day I'd come and I'd ask her, do you want to come out today? And every day she would say, maybe tomorrow. Now, here's what I'm willing to bet is true about you, because it's certainly true about me. You've probably never been stuck to a toilet seat before. I'm willing to bet. If you have, don't admit it, okay? I'm willing to bet you've never been stuck to a toilet seat before. But I am willing to bet that you have spent more time than you ever intended to spend in places that you never intended to be. And there have been areas of your life, and certainly areas of my life, where you have found yourself stuck in a place you never meant to spend much time in. And yet time went on, and you never left. For some of us, we look at our finances, and we say, we know, hey, there's some things that we need to do to kind of move in some different directions. We know we need to get our spending under control. We know what the plan is. We've even made a budget. You've got it on a piece of paper. You've got a beautiful spreadsheet, right? And every time you go to put it into practice, you just kind of look at the sale at Target and you look at your budget and you go, maybe tomorrow. For some of us, your marriage has been slowly drifting and fading, and you know the things that you need to start doing. You know the ways that you need to change for her. You know the ways that you need to change for him. You know the steps that you need to take. You know the counselor you could call, and you've been thinking about it for a while. And every time you think about it, you say, maybe tomorrow. For some of us, there's health goals that we have in our life, things you've been wanting to do, things you've wanted to stop eating, things you've wanted to start doing, workouts you wanted to begin, right? Lifting those weights, right? There's things we've wanted to start, and you know what to do. You've researched all the greatest plans, and you know it really doesn't matter which plan you go with as long as you have one, and every time you think about doing it, you go, yeah, I'm going to do that one day, and maybe tomorrow. And we can maybe tomorrow ourselves day after day after day after day and area after area after area of our life. And eventually, and you know this, you've experienced this, eventually at some point, tomorrow becomes yesterday and dreams become regrets. Now, interestingly, there's a thing that we've all been taught to do about this. There's a way that we've all been taught to kind of overcome this and get past this and make sure that this doesn't happen to us. In fact, it's something that you were taught at a very young age would be necessary for you and important to you and valuable for you. That thing was willpower. Like, just do it. Just use willpower to get through it. Just discipline yourself enough. Just try hard enough. Just do enough. Just grit it out enough, and eventually you can work your way through it. We learn this over and over and over again. People teach us from a very early age. They said, where there's a will, there's a... Right, that's right. Right? There's a will, there's a way. And here's the thing we would say about this, right? Let me just say this. The way of the will is always, always, always uphill. The way of the will is always uphill. And sometimes you might get there. But you will always be more tired than when you started, more exhausted than when you started, more miserable than when you started, if you get there eventually. Waking up earlier than you've ever woken up before is never fun. You don't wake up excited to do it. It's always, always, always work. Cutting up the credit card is always, always, always work. Working on the relationship is always, always, always work. Creating the boundary in your life is always, always, always work. And you can grit yourself into doing it. You can work so hard into doing it. You can strive for it over and over again. But the way forward is always uphill. In fact, some of the most disciplined people you know are also some of the most miserable people you know to be around, because they're some of the most exhausted people from trying over and over and over again. And so you can use willpower to a point, but eventually, you know this because you've experienced this, eventually you're going to feel exhausted, you're going to feel empty, you're going to feel tired, and you're going to feel frustrated, and this is the biggest one you're going to feel at some point, frustrated with yourself by the fact that yourself can't quite be the self that you always hoped and desired and wanted for it to become. Right? And eventually, at some point, you probably are going to find yourself or have found yourself saying words like the words written by Paul 2,000 years ago, one of the earliest Christian leaders, who talked a lot about self-change, talked a lot about self-development, talked a lot about becoming a new person and a different kind of person and growing and shifting and adjusting. And he writes these words at one point where he actually reflects on his own ability or inability to use willpower to become the person he desires to be. And see if these words resonate with you at any level this morning. Paul wrote these words. He said, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right. I know the right thing to do. I know what it looks like to put a right plan in place. I know the right steps to take, and I want to do them, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. Instead, I do what I keep telling myself I'm going to stop doing. He keeps going. He says, I've discovered this principle of life. In other words, I've discovered this to be a law of life, a principle of life, a rule you can just trust and live by. As sure as Newton's law of gravity is, this law is true for me and true for me. Is you. He said, I found this to be a principle of life that when I want to do what is right, I inevitably just do what is wrong. Now, this was not really a new perspective for Paul to share at his time. In fact, in Paul's time, this really wasn't anything groundbreaking, anything earth-shattering at all. In fact, Paul was just joining the philosophers of his day and reflecting on the difficulties that they experienced over and over again. In fact, hundreds of years before Paul, Euripides, a Greek playwright, wrote these words. He said, we know and understand what is noble, but do not bring it to completion. We know the right thing to do, but we never, never, never fully do it. Sometime after him, Ovid, a Roman poet, wrote these words. He said, some deluding power is holding me helpless against my will. Desire persuades me one way, but my reason still persuades me another way. In other words, my desire and my reason, my emotions, the things that I feel and the things that I know to be right for me are constantly at war and at conflict with each other. And then just a few years ago, a modern poet, someone you've probably never even heard of before, penned these words. She said, it's me. Hi. I'm the problem. It's me. Right? So listen, Paul is just joining countless of people over and over and over again who have recognized the human condition and saying, hey, let me just be really honest with myself here. No more excuses. No more false reasons. No more, man, if they had just done this, I wouldn't be this way. No more, man, if this hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have to do this. No more, oh man, it was just a really hard day, so it wasn't the best day to start. No more of that. The problem at the center of all of it is me, because I'm at the center of all of it. Now, this is where Paul, and if you read his writings, now this is where he begins to differ from the ancient philosophers of his day. Because all the ancient philosophers of his day said, okay, this is true of the human condition. And they almost all of them agreed that if you would just reason yourself enough, if you would just try hard enough yourself, if you would just work hard enough that you could develop enough reason and intellect and control your mind enough to overcome your desires and your emotions. And yet, almost every one of those philosophers also admitted that they personally had not yet reached that state. And Paul just takes a different direction from them. He just jumps off the exit at this point in the reasoning. And he goes, hey, look, I've tried all of that. It doesn't work. And he just reflects on his own inability to become what he wants to be and is honest about the fact that he needs something beyond himself to help him become it. He says, oh, what a miserable person I am. I'm just tired of this. I'm exhausted of this. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried and I'm empty. He says, who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death? Which feels kind of extreme at first, right? Like, oh man, Paul, death? Is it really that bad, right? But quite honestly, you have days where you feel just the same as this. Days where you get home from trying so hard and not having checked any of the boxes you meant to check. And you get to the end of the day and you fall on the couch and you feel empty, you feel exhausted, you feel overwhelmed. You say, my tank is empty, I'm out of gas. I just feel, I'm dead today. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was putting my 6-year-old to bed and she was supposed to be getting her pajamas on, which is never actually happening when it's supposed to be happening, right? But I walked down to check on her and she's just laying in the chair in her room, just like this, with her hand over her chest. And she had a long day. I knew she was tired. She's just laying like this. I said, hey, what are you doing? She said, I'm checking to see if my heart still works. Now, listen, even at 6 years old, she recognized, I'm wiped out. I'm empty. And intellectually, I know that I'm alive right now, but emotionally, I feel lifeless. And something's not working right. I'm at the end of my tank. Now, Paul looks at all this. Paul's like, I tried, I failed, I've spiraled, I'm exhausted. And then he goes on and he actually begins, he actually acknowledges, hey, I need something or someone to help free me from this. And if you keep reading his writings, what you find is he begins to reflect on someone and write on someone who he believed actually had helped free him from himself. Now, what's interesting about this is the person that he believed helped free him from his death was actually someone who had literally died 20 years ago, prior to his writings. Many of you are familiar with this. There's a man named Jesus who had spent 33 years on earth, and in the last 3 years of his time on earth, went around and was teaching incredible teachings, drawing incredible crowds, but as time went on, his claims about himself became bolder and bolder and bolder and bolder to the point that he actually was claiming to be the Son of God, that he carried the same power and the same divinity as God himself. Now, when you walk into a Jewish nation and start proclaiming that about yourself, people kind of take notice, and some people don't like it. And the religious leaders of that day actually had him executed by the Roman Empire because of the claims that he was making. And everyone who knew him saw him. Everyone who knew of him heard or saw of his death. People watched for hours as he died on a cross one afternoon. Then the author of Mark begins to tell us about what happened next. He tells us there's a group of women a few days later who actually chose, they said, hey, we're gonna go anoint his body and put spices and oils on his body, which is pretty customary for the day, especially of someone who was kind of a noble figure who had died. So they start going to the tomb, and the author of Mark tells us that very early on that Sunday morning, just at sunrise, these women went to the tomb. And on the way there, they were asking each other, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? It was heavy stone. They put the stone over the tomb. They knew it had to be moved. They knew they couldn't do it. And who will roll away the stone for us? Now, I've never actually tried to move a giant stone before, but I did try to roll a dryer out of my basement last year. And it only took one step before I herniated a disc and was flat on the floor of the stairwell. And it was a matter of minutes before I was looking at my wife saying, who will roll away this dryer for us, you know? And the answer was Joe and Gary, wherever they are. Thank you, again, for that. Now, the women, they didn't even try. They didn't even plan to try. They knew they couldn't move this thing. They go. The author tells us that as they arrived, they looked up and saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled aside. Now, don't miss this. They knew they couldn't do it. They got there, and they discovered very quickly that what they knew they couldn't do had already been done for them. And they walk in to check things out. They're expecting a body. They don't find a body. What they find instead is an angel, and an angel looks at them and says these words. He says, don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead. Now, it's a wild, audacious claim in the moment for obvious reasons. And word spread quickly among those who knew Jesus the closest. And Jesus' first followers, his disciples, the ones who had followed him the most closely, the most devoutly, the most passionately, the most intimately, get word of this. And then they get word from Jesus that they're to meet him on the side of a mountain a ways away. So they travel out to Galilee to meet him. The author of the book of Matthew took the time to tell us and write for us exactly what happened. He was there for all of it, exactly what happened on Jesus' last day on earth before he ascended into heaven. He wrote these words. He said, then the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him. And this is the part that gets me every time, honestly. Maybe because it's been me so many times. He says, but some of them doubted. Now, honestly, this is one of my favorite lines in all of the scriptures. Because in so many ways, this has been me. In so many moments, this is me. And the idea that the first followers of Jesus still weren't completely sure about Jesus, in many ways, is actually comforting to me. In fact, I'd say to you, if you're here this morning and you're still not sure about all of this, if all this just sounds a little bit too good to be true to you, you're actually in really good company. Because the first followers of Jesus, many of them, they weren't quite so sure either. And then Jesus, this is fascinating to me, Jesus, knowing their doubt, actually looks at this group of 11 guys and begins to give them his final instructions for them before he leaves earth. And he begins to tell them how they should go about building the church, how they should kind of move this movement that he started forward, what should be most important to them. He gives them those instructions. And then, just before he leaves, he gives them one last thing, and it's not an instruction. The last thing he gives them is a promise. It's a promise for them. It's a promise for you. It's a promise for me. And Matthew took care to write down these words, not because he was afraid that he might forget them, but because he knew that one day you might need to hear them. And in Jesus' last words, he said to them, be sure of this. In other words, I know some of you still aren't sure about everything. I know a lot has happened over the last several days. I know a lot of this doesn't make sense. I know you watched me die, and I'm here, So that's confusing in so many ways, and I know you're still sorting it out, and you might sort it out for the rest of your entire life, but while you're in the process of sorting it out, at least be sure of this one thing. Be sure of this. I'm with you always, even to the end of the age, until the very last day of the universe. I'm with you. On the day that you feel stuck, burnt out, wiped out, and exhausted, I'm with you. On the day you get in a fight with your spouse and you say the thing that you swore you would never say to her again, I'm with you. On the day you're looking at your bank statement and wondering, how did I end up overspending the budget again and again? And when am I ever going to get control of this? I'm with you. On the day you were supposed to finish that homework and yet you found yourself just binging Netflix till 1 a.m. and then frustrated at yourself that you did it again, I'm with you. On the day when your kid still hasn't put their pajamas on after being told 5 times to put their pajamas on, and then the 6th time you just lose it and you say the thing that you know that they're going to remember for the rest of their life, I'm with you. On the day when you're ready to throw in the towel, on the day when you're ready to say, I'm done, I am who I am, I'll never be better, on the day when you pick up a substance again that you swore you'd never touch because it's been a hard day and you don't know how else to get through it, I'm with you. On the day you're ready to call it quits, I'm with you. Because here's the thing. Resurrection wasn't just a one-time event. It's an everyday invitation. And every single day of your life, your Lord and Savior walks with you, is present to you, desires to be with you, and live with you. And the power that you find yourself over and over again looking for, hoping for, longing for, wondering for, the moments when you find yourself saying, I got nothing left to give it, He waits for you to lean in to Him. In fact, Paul, whose words we read just a few minutes ago, Paul, who was exasperated and done and frustrated with himself. If you keep reading his writings, he even says at one point, he says, the same Spirit or the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives within you, or has the ability to live within you. Now, so there's a piece of this, quite honestly, that's kind of the fine print of this whole thing. It's kind of the thing that maybe some of you have gone your whole life and nobody's told you this part. Right? You've been to services like this, you've been to gatherings like this, and you've heard things like this, and none of this is new, and you're like, yeah, that's great, cool, got it, heard that before. Right? There's a piece of this, there's an asterisk, there's a fine print, there's a little bit of it I think actually matters most. Believing this will not change your life. I mean that. And some of you know that. Because some of you have sat in rooms like this before. And you've heard conversations like this before. And you've heard things like this before. And you nodded along. You said, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I'd consider that. And then you went home. You woke up the next morning. And that Monday was just as stressful, chaotic, draining, emptying as the last Monday. And nothing changed. Believing this will not change your tomorrow. It won't change your next day. It won't change the day after that. Believing this will not change your life. Building your life around this will change every day of your life. And if we're going to build our life around this, we've got to do at least 3 things with this. In fact, these are the 3 things that we're going to talk about over the next 3 weeks. I'm just going to give them to you today. The first thing we've got to do is we have to redevelop our goals. Some of us, the thing that we're chasing in life the thing that we're aspiring for, the thing that we're longing for, the thing that we've made a plan for but haven't fully stepped into it, the thing that we've hoped to start one day but haven't ever gotten around to it. It's not even the right thing. And your focus is so misaligned from the way that you were created to be focused and living that you're going to find yourself running uphill over and over and over again because you've lost sight of what you were made to do and the ways you were created to be and live in our world. And if you would just find the right focus, I'm telling you, everything in your life would shift. We've got to redevelop our goals. Second thing we have to do is reframe our thoughts. I heard someone say this recently. You know, the most influential communicator in your life is you. You listen to yourself, you hear yourself more than anyone else. And for some of us, the best thing you could do for yourself is actually change the way that you talk to yourself. We're going to spend a week talking about how we talk to ourselves. It's the last thing we have to do. We've got to retrain our habits. We actually have to shift the way that we engage every single day of our life, but not from our own power, not from our own grit, but from a deeper power that's available to us. We've got to let go of some habits that have been holding us back, things we've been saying, I'm going to stop doing it, I'm going to stop doing it, I'm going to stop doing it tomorrow. We've got to actually replace those habits, not just stop them, but replace them with something better, new, and life-giving for us. I'm going to give you a preview on that real quick. I'll tell you this real quick. The best habits I think you can put in place is actually the habit you started about an hour ago. When you rushed the kids out of their room this morning, you scrambled to get them to throw their clothes on, and you finally stopped caring about how wrinkly they were or whether or not they had oatmeal down the front of them, because you didn't have time anymore, and you chased them into the car. And you sped into here on 2 wheels and slid in real fast. You know what I mean? One of the best habits you can put in your life is starting the first day of your week with a little bit of space to focus on something that's bigger than the last crisis that happened in your life, and something that might refocus your attention, refocus your thoughts, refocus your goals for the next week of your life in a way that otherwise wouldn't happen. I've had a friend who said this not too long ago. She came here for the first time, had never been to church before, came here for the first time, and she said, this is the best way to start my week. Another friend, he started coming, it'd been a while since he's been in church, started coming recently. He goes, I tell my friends, I've never felt worse after going to church. Listen, one of the best habits you can put in your life is creating space like this on a regular basis for you, to lean into something that's greater than you, that might just change the way that you walk into Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And my hope is that you'll make these conversations a habit of the next few weeks. Let me pray for you. And then we're going to sing one more song together. God, I thank you for the ways that you have gone out of your way to make yourself available and known to us. God, for thousands of years, people found themselves wondering where you were and how to engage with you. And then you said, no more. Enough. I'm breaking in. I'm doing whatever it takes to make sure that my people know me and know that they don't have to live alone. Jesus, for the person in the room this morning who finds himself at the end of their tank wondering if they'll ever become the person they hope to be, if they'll ever end a day satisfied and glad for the things that they did and the ways they moved forward and the things they accomplished. God, would you give us hope this morning? Not a hope that's dependent on ourselves and our own doings, not a hope that's even based on a plan or the perfect checklist. But God, a hope that's based on knowing that there's a power beyond us that desires to partner with us and work in us and through us for something even greater than us. We thank you for that. Would you help us to trust it? It's in Christ's name we pray.